Crow Canyon's work out at Goodman Point Pueblo is part of a 6-year project with 2 phases. I was the project director for the excavations at Goodman Point Pueblo. Those excavations are being conducted in partnership with the National Park Service and as part of a public education program where we use students and adults from the lay public to do our excavations for us. Goodman Point Pueblo was a stone masonry village. It was built between about 1260 and 1275 AD. It's built in the Central Mesa Verde region. It was one of numerous large canyon head villages. They were actually all larger than the cliff dwellings at Mesa Verde, which were built at the same time and inhabited at the same time. The big canyon head villages held quite a few more people. We base our population estimates on the number of kivas, since those were the primary residential structures. There were about 114 kivas at Goodman Point Pueblo, for example, and Cliff Palace has fewer than 30 kivas. So these villages were built between about 1260 and 1280 and were depopulated right about the time the entire region was depopulated. In our 32 months of excavations out at Goodman Point Pueblo, we had some unexpected finds, some discoveries. One of the most important probably was our discovery of a D-shaped bi-wall structure. It was multi-story. It was perched right on the canyon rim, just above the spring, so it was prime real estate within this pueblo. And it was very similar to a structure that was found at San Canyon Pueblo, which is just a few miles west-southwest in a neighboring canyon head. So probably these 2 communities, which were contemporaneous, were friendly and interacted and intentionally built structures that were similar to each other. So the D-shaped bi-wall structure is really important, and we'll be really looking at that closely as we move into the analytic phase of the project. Another unexpected find was the height of the enclosing wall that went around the village. Our excavations showed that in places where we exposed sections of enclosing wall, the indications are that it was at least 1 story tall or about 6 feet, which is, it's more than just an edge of the village type of a boundary. It was really a barrier. It was visually and physically difficult to cross over, and it would have been a formidable barrier between people inside the village and outside. We were also surprised that structures rested right on bedrock. We were looking for earlier components, earlier occupations of this canyon head location, and we found nothing. All of these structures rested right on the bedrock of the canyon rim. And a lot of the deposits were much shallower than we expected, especially away from the canyon rim up farther north. The northernmost architectural blocks had very shallow middens or trash deposits, which indicated that they did not live in this village very long. So it was one line of evidence that suggested this very, very short occupation span. Our last really unexpected find was that when we first mapped the pueblo, we labeled several sort of circular rubble mounds as towers. And that's a really customary and traditional thing to do. When you find a circular rubble mound, that's an indication of a tower. However, we tested several of these, and they proved to contain the features of kivas: bench surfaces, bench faces, ventilator tunnels, hearts, deflectors. They're kivas architecturally. So that was a really unexpected find. One of the main things that we want to learn about these late Pueblo III villages, these terminal Pueblo III villages, is how were they depopulated? Why were they depopulated? When were they depopulated? Because that gives us much more information and a much clearer picture of how and why and when the entire region was depopulated. So at Goodman Point Pueblo, there is really clear evidence of strife, and that evidence is echoed in our earlier excavations at San Canyon Pueblo, at Castle Rock Pueblo. Well, everything we know about Goodman Point so far was drawn from our field analysis and our field data. So there are years ahead of us with pulling together the analytic data, analyzing all of the materials that were collected in the field, entering the data, making the maps, and so forth. So we have years ahead of us, and the final results, of course, are years away. Everything we know now is just in the form form of what we learned actually as we were digging. So that was phase one. Phase two of the Goodman Point project is now underway. It's being directed by Grant Coffey, and that phase of the excavations actually is testing the smaller farmsteads that are scattered on the landscape around Goodman Point Pueblo itself. We think those farmsteads were earlier, and that the people who lived in those farmsteads are the people who eventually then moved to the canyon head and built the big Pueblo. So the results from phase two will really help complete the picture of the entire community, and once phase two is finished and we have the analytic data from that phase, we will then be able to pull all those data together and have what we hope is probably the clearest picture of any community right up until the very end of the depopulation of the Mesa Verde region.